we have we've opened an office in Charlottesville at the dairy market, and we're hoping you're going to come visit us there. Hillary actually works as a campus recruiter out of our Charlottesville office. I'm in Richmond, Virginia. We are going to have summer interns in 4 locations this coming summer in Washington, D.C., Richmond, Virginia, Irvine, California, and also in Atlanta, where we own apartments.com, and that's headquartered there. We're also looking to hire 4th years this fall to start when you graduate. And we're eager to get to know you. I'm going to turn it over to Hillary, who has put together a fantastic presentation on how to develop your own elevator pitch, whether you're talking to CoStar or any other possible employer this fall. We wish you the very best of luck.
Okay, can everyone hear me and can everyone see the screen?
Looks good, Hillary.
Beautiful. Well, good afternoon. And first, I want to say just happy Friday. I hope everyone has had an amazing summer and are just really taking advantage of pretty much the last weekends as we approach the school year. So just to reemphasize, my name is Hillary Geisinger. I am a recruiter for the CoStar Group, and I have been working with students around career development for the past 5 years now, and it is one of my absolute favorite things to do. So really just know before we dive into it, it's just a treat to be here and just kind of make this introduction. Just to expand on what Crystal said, we do have a wonderful space here in Charlottesville. I hope to invite you guys. I want you all in here. We want this to be an extension of the university space. So if you like how I've presented, and what I'm presenting today, I hope to kind of get you in the building. We have a wonderful little auditorium and we can just, do more. But today we are doing a virtual elevator pitch, and out of all the topics, I've presented on in my career, I would argue this is probably one that is most overlooked and probably not really thought of. And in my opinion, it's pretty important in terms of when you look at the puzzle as you're piecing together opportunities, because it's almost like a summary of your story. And I'll elaborate on that, throughout the presentation. But right now, I really want to dive into it. And without really sounding too cliche or too sappy, I just want you to close your eyes, or at least just kind of like sit there and like really thoughtfully reflect on, 2 scenarios. So imagine yourself, you are at a networking event. So right now for the engineering school, you have Tech Night Takeover that's coming up on the 31st or starting on the 31st. You have mock interview day that's in the beginning of September. You have the actual engineering fair that's on the 17th. And the point is you have a lot of opportunities coming up where you're going to be asked, what do you do? Where do you work? What projects are you involved in? Or the big one, tell me about yourself. And this is not only going to be a question during an interview it's not going to be a question during networking events, but I guarantee you it's going to be a question asked of you in almost every single interview or in your early career, as well as throughout your entire professional and, academic career. So right now, my point being is, in this moment, what would you say? And I really want you to think about it. And if you don't know, if you're caught off guard, or you don't even know how to answer the question, this is why it is so important to have something prepared and practice, because you never know when an opportunity is going to present itself. You really could be in an elevator with a hiring manager. And it's just kind of, we want to think about these things. People want to know your story because they want to know, your perspective, what ideas, what passion you're going to bring to the table and why you're worth it. And that's where the elevator pitch comes in. And that's why it's so important. So we have 3 pieces of what an effective pitch looks like. The most important is that you are brief. People are busy, people are tired, and you need to give them a reason why you're more important or why your idea is more important than whatever else they have going on. And I think we all do it. It is natural to zone out when you're uninterested or you have more pressing things to talk about. So keep it brief. We want to keep it to 20 to 30 seconds. That's really that sweet spot. Another piece of that formula is going to be, being persuasive, and having confidence has a lot to do with that. So when you're trying to grab someone's attention, you need to showcase how you're going to add value. And whether that's for a job or you're pitching an idea, showcasing how you're going to add value is what makes people's ears perk up. It's what grabs their attention and really keeps them engaged. So, and in my experience, a lot of students have trouble doing this because they're just too humble. And whether it's imposter syndrome or being afraid of of bragging. I've really seen students just struggle to sell their own accomplishments. So, my biggest words of wisdom here are that no one's going to sell yourself better than you can. You know what you're doing. So really take advantage of the resources you have. You have a fabulous team right at your fingertips who want to sit down and work with you. They want to know your academic and professional history. So if you're struggling with the confidence piece or just understanding how to do that in a professional way, they can work with you and they want to. I want to. So really you just have to take the initiative and you have to take the first step and really just reach out and ask for help. And if you're shy or on the more introverted side, I understand that can, be a big step. So moving on, how do we write an elevator pitch? What's the formula? What are things to think about? And we're going to get into all the details with each of the bullets you see on the screen. Really just the first is being, who are you? And in an elevator pitch, it's one of the first things you're going to lead off with is just introducing yourself. So the typical thing that I've heard, as a recruiter in my career is just someone giving me their name and their major. So as an example, my name's Hillary and I'm a computer science major with a minor in entrepreneurship. So that's wonderful. It answers the question, but it doesn't make you stand out. And if, you and I were talking at a career fair, and as gifted as I think engineers are, I am not going to remember you because 100 other students came up and said the exact same thing to me. So how do we fix this? Let's focus on the why. Why are you interested in computer science? Why did you pick that major? As an example, I know there are other pieces, in terms of engineering. So to go and elaborate more on my example, my name is Hillary. I'm a computer science major because I get to turn instructions into actions. Plus, I get to work collaboratively with my peers. I've actually had the opportunity to be involved in a fun community project where I redesigned the virtual icebreaker experience. So you can kind of see more examples on the slide, but the biggest takeaway I want you to take with this approach is that it not only makes you stand out, but it humanizes you. So naturally, when you have something in common with someone, the other party wants to engage and discuss the common ground. Moving on, another piece of this formula kind of touches on what we spoke about earlier, and that's where are you adding value? And we can showcase this by asking the questions, what do you do? What problem are you solving? And how do we showcase that, in only a couple of words? So kind of look at the examples. And this isn't a resume where you have to be super technical and, make a point to measure your value and, provide some numbers as evidence. I personally would actually advise against it because by being super technical, it tends to lead people down rabbit holes. And the next thing you know, you're talking for, 2 minutes and your audience is just, they're long gone. So the goal here is really just to be more high level. Think of your strengths, think about how you do your job. And if you want to be more technical, if you think you can go ahead and do it correctly, make sure it's something that won't need an extended explanation for your audience to understand. So again, kind of just to continue with my example, my name's Hillary and I'm a computer science major because I get to turn instructions into actions. Plus I get to work collaboratively, really struggling with that word today, with my peers. I've actually had the opportunity to be involved in a community project where I redesigned the virtual icebreaker experience. This actually increased engagement and activity with the teams who used our product, ultimately leading to less turnover. So just kind of emphasizing that last piece where I added value by saying my product, my project led to less turnover for teams that were working with it. And last but not least, you almost want to force, whoever you're talking with, whoever you're pitching to engage with you. So don't just stop talking and expect them to talk right back because they might not. They might just nod their head or say something like, that's great. And it stinks because that ultimately is, the end of the conversation. And it's really hard to say, to even talk back to a comment like that. Like, what do you say? Like, yep, that's great. So I kind of tell students at the end of your pitch, ask a question or give them a call to action. So personally, I'm in favor of a question because it really requires an answer, and whoever you're, talking to, you're putting them on the spot. And honestly, 90% of the people you're pitching to, if you put them on the spot, if you ask them a question, they're going to be polite. And if it's a yes or no question, it's going to be yes, because, they're being polite, and it's a win for you because you're asking them something and you're getting their information, and now you have the ability to follow up with like another time to talk. For example, if you asked them, you know, do you have a business card so I can follow up with you next week? So now the ball's back in your court. You can schedule more time to talk, and you can kind of go into those details, those more technical details, to kind of show off and showcase your skill set. On the other hand, for those of you who don't know what a call to action is, this is pretty much just telling someone just to act on something. So for example, I'm sure the majority of us have done something like online shopping. So when you go to your cart and you add, you know, you click the checkout because you're done shopping, the checkout is the call to action because it's encouraging you to act on, you know, buying whatever it is in your shopping cart. So with an elevator pitch, if there's anything you can encourage your audience to act on, you know, go ahead and throw it out there. Continuing my example, but of course there are some others on the screen. But with my example, I could end my pitch with, do you have a business card? I would love to follow up in an email to schedule a time to chat more in depth. Or for a call to action, I could end with, read the article Medium highlighted in their magazine. Both of them are engaging their audience and just kind of, you know, having them act on something afterwards. But y'all, that really is it. You know, once you've identified those 3 or 4 pieces, you really just have to put it all together and, you know, practice to make it sound more natural. And I really want to emphasize that point, and I'm going to emphasize it again in a minute. You want it to sound natural more than the scripted, you know, kind of like how it's scripted, how like I'm reading it. And to continue on with the theme, I've provided some examples. It's just I'm kind of making up my own. I'm very against presenting and just reading off of the slide, which is why I'm giving you so many options to, you know, listen, but also read. So again, with my example, my name is Hillary and I'm a computer science major because I get to turn instructions into actions. Plus I get to work collaboratively with my peers. I've actually had the opportunity to be involved in a community project where I redesigned the virtual icebreaker experience. This ultimately led to less turnover because I increased engagement and creativity with teams who were using my product. Do you happen to have the time to chat about any opportunities within your company? Boom. Super short, super sweet. The only critique I would even give myself is that, of course, like I'm reading my example and it sounds very scripted. It doesn't sound natural, but hopefully you get the point that it shows value, it engages with my audience, and it really does put them on the spot by, you know, having a question. So before we wrap up, excuse me, I do want to go over some other items like common mistakes. I'll get into the verbal ones first pretty quickly. I've said it and I've hinted that rambling is a pretty big no-no, and it's very common. Rambling is also the cause of 2 other common issues students face, you know, when getting the opportunity to talk to recruiters or hiring managers. So that first one is saying, and this is huge. In my experience, look at me, I'm already saying it, but in my experience, it's really brought on by nervousness and just from people forgetting what to say. And then it just snowballs into this, you know, terrible experience really for both parties. It also reflects pretty poorly on you. So in my position and how I speak with students, I completely understand you may be nervous, but others may not be like me. And most people in leadership positions, they want to speak and hire with those who are prepared, which means they have practiced, and thus, you know, by practicing, you're getting more confidence. The second is just being way too technical. We touched on it in the beginning, but I want to bring up the point that by bringing rambling and technical mistakes together, when you do this, sometimes it just also makes you sound a little bit desperate, which really isn't the impression that you want to make. And just to even wrap this section up, I want to say I get it. I am probably the queen of talking and going down rabbit holes. I could honestly talk to a wall for hours. And I think it's even harder to know when to stop yourself when you're in these situations like a networking event where you want to showcase yourself and you really just show all that you have to offer. So naturally that competitive nature comes out, and it's really magnified when you have someone who's very passionate about what they do as well as what they want to accomplish. However, biggest takeaway, you don't want to be that, you know, remembered as the person who couldn't stop talking and couldn't read the room or couldn't read the body language. One more thing I do want to note is just talking too fast, which, like all of the above, it can be fixed by, you know, just taking the time to practice. So if you haven't picked up on the hint, most people don't do this. And I cannot emphasize enough that as a recruiter, hearing these pitches daily, it really sets yourself apart. last thing I really want to note are just kind of like some nonverbal things. The first I want to address is the handshake. Selfishly, this graphic is from a presentation from pre-COVID, and I really like it, so I kept it. But handshakes are one of those cloudy territories these days. So two things. I want to give my opinion and say it's fine if you're not comfortable like touching people, especially moving into this fall with a questionable Delta variant. And as a recruiter, if you opted not to shake my hand or you didn't make the move first, I would not think any less of you. And I mean, I can't speak for anyone else, but I don't think anyone else would. It's just a very gray area these days, and every single institution has different requirements on how they really want you to interact, and everyone has different comfort levels. So really my advice would be to focus on your body language. Make sure you're sitting up, you're standing straight, you're looking at the person, you're smiling. And even when you have a mask on, try to smile. Smiling affects your eyes and like the way that like your eyes look. Another is nodding your head to show active listening. If you're in the position of, listening, and watch what you're doing with your hands as well. If you're a hand talker like myself, I don't know if you can see me in the screen, but it's just be conscious of your body language. If you are a handshaker on the other side, make sure it's firm. This circles back into the confidence conversation that we've had earlier. Employers see weaker handshakes as a cue that someone isn't confident, that they are intimidated, all of that, all of that. The other thing is your knowledge of the company. If you are pitching to someone, it is a very good idea to have a high level understanding of their company. So take CoStar as an example. If you pitched to me and we got into a discussion, but you weren't able to fully engage with me because you don't know anything about CoStar Group, it doesn't look good. And even just to preface on this a little bit, for example, when you are going to like these career fairs, if you're going to make a point to go to each table, just make sure you're looking at the employer, like look at their mission statements, look at how they're, I guess, organized, and just make sure you're understanding, what it is they do and how they're organized so that you can actually talk and engage with the recruiter. So in this example, I'm not saying you have to understand all there is to know about the CoStar Group, but you would at least want to understand or know that we were a market intelligence platform that serves the real estate industry, and that is at a minimum. It would be better if you knew the various brands we operated under, we have operating under us, as well as, the type of technology and research we invest in. But other than that, yeah, that is, I tried to make this quick, just kind of like an elevator pitch. You do want to make sure that workshops are, equally as brief. So if you do have any questions, please don't be shy. Hopefully you've picked up on my high energy and passion working with students. So whatever it is, I'm here to help, no judgment, all that fun stuff. And thank you so much for Francis and Peggy for having us.
Hillary, thank you so much. Students, any questions, you can unmute if you'd like, or you can put your questions in the chat. I have some questions too that I'm going to kind of present, but we would love to hear from students as well.
And would it help if I just like unshared my screen?
Sure,
or do you?
okay.
Okay. It's okay.
Francis put in the chat some potential questions to end your elevator pitch with when Hillary was talking about ways to end your elevator pitch. Fran dropped some of the sample questions there in the chat.
Yeah, and Hillary, I love that idea because a lot of times we will, when we're helping students with their elevator pitch and sort of telling their story, they're like, how do I end it? Like, what do I say next? So that was really helpful, or like a call to action. I really like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes we'll have students that will ask, like, how long should my elevator pitch be?
So I always recommend, and Crystal, please feel free to chime in. I'm Chatty Cathy, but I always recommend 20 to 30 seconds. And this just goes with like natural human behavior. And I'm just going to emphasize it again. Everyone is very different. We all have all sorts of tasks on our mind. Some people that you may be talking to have family obligations. So if you just can really, I would say closer to 20 seconds. I would say the standard is 30, but you just want to make sure you can get your point across super quickly, and make sure that the value add that you are presenting captures their attention so that if they want to talk to you, they can, and that's kind of when it's acceptable to go over, because then the pitch is done.
Yeah, I agree, Hillary. I thought the examples that you gave were excellent, and when you count it up, it's probably not more than 5 sentences, or so, and then it allows for an exchange, which is actually really what you're after. You're trying to engage the recruiter to talk with, to speak with you. And so getting their attention in all the creative ways that Hillary recommended, and then ending with a question, hopefully you'll actually end up in a conversation and stand out instead of just being another person in the School of Engineering who's interested in getting an internship or job.
Thank you
So
so much. Oh, yeah.
We have a question in the chat. How is the tell me about yourself question for an elevator pitch different than if an interviewer asks you that in an interview?
Great question.
That is a wonderful question. And I think it's very like situational. So when you are doing a pitch, the tell me about yourself, if you are talking like at a networking event or something like that, the goal is just to kind of engage, right? It's, there is some sort of end where you want to engage back and forth with whoever you're speaking with. So if you know who you're speaking with, you're able just to kind of be a little bit more flexible in terms of what your elevator pitch is. And it's a little more high level, if that makes sense. So it may just be like, I'm a recruiter and I like to work with, I like to work with students. All of my students have gotten jobs, like what opportunities do you have at your company, right? Like you're asking for the opportunities as an example, versus if you're in an interview, you're not going to ask really, like you're not going to really lead off with a question in an interview and then tell me about yourself. You're not really going to have a question or a call to action in an interview, and please anyone else chime in. But in an interview, it's going to be more, tell me about your background. Tell me what projects that you've done that relate relative to this role specifically. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree with what you said on it's the situation. If you're in an interview, you have already differentiated yourself and are part of a select group that we're taking time to talk to. And so now's your opportunity to tell us why we should hire you. And the odds are, if we're interviewing you, we actually already are thinking you're probably a really good fit for us. And you're in a small group. So it's the time to sell. It's the time to really talk about your accomplishments. Whereas, as Hillary said, in an elevator pitch, you're simply trying to get engagement. So you don't want to come across as sell, like in a, almost like too much kind of way, and so remembering that if you're in an interview, that's a coveted position that is already a select group.
Hillary and Crystal, many of our events will be virtual this fall. And so a lot of times with the career fair events, a student might have like a meeting that's individual with you that might be 10 minutes, or also a group session. And we talked about like the handshake and sort of introducing yourself. What does it look like when you're in the room with a student and they're coming in? What's the best way for them to stand out? And also with the handshake, is it like a nice wave? You talked about the delivery with a smile and good eye contact. And then will you, when the student comes in, will you immediately say, well, tell me about you? Or how do you get that started so they feel comfortable talking about their pitch?
I'm sure Crystal can elaborate on everything I'm about to say, but I can say what stands out to be most is how much research have you done with the institution? Yes, as an icebreaker, I would say like best practice is always just to warm people up to say, tell me about yourself. But for students to really stand out, it's almost like they're smart enough to look at the company's background. And as they're telling me about themselves, they're bridging their experience to what we want as a company.
I agree 100%, Hillary. Our job as recruiters when we're at a recruiting event is to meet you. So we're going to be really welcoming. We're going to be reaching out. We're going to be saying, like, tell us about yourself. And, so you'll have an opportunity, you'll have an at-bat. And it's what you do with it that differentiates you. So the research is key.
And I have a direct message here. And the question is, most of the hiring managers look for an experience level. How do you cover that with your education knowledge, and how can you change their views? Hopefully this answers your question if I'm understanding it correctly. And I think this is pretty applicable to like early careers and early talent. It's really hard because I think a lot of students graduate and they think the only thing that they need to that they can talk about is internship experience. But especially with technical roles that are offered in I guess like through capstone projects or in like majors like, computer science, or even just like throughout the engineering school, you have so many projects and capstones that you're able to talk about and showcase how you're using those skills. Like if you developed a website, you can put that on your resume as a project. It doesn't have to be an internship to, be put on your resume. If it's a project, an academic project, put it on there. Say you developed a website, and then show how you developed it through the different languages that you may have used. And that's just an example. I'm not a website developer, so like take it with a grain of salt. But if you don't have a lot of internship experience, don't be afraid to put your academic experience on there, because with technical roles, experience is experience. And I think it goes back to the conversation of how to sell yourself. You can't be afraid just because it's not professional to hesitate to put it on there.
And I'm going to come at this I agree with everything Hillary said, but coming at this with wearing, my legal hat. If a job is advertised requiring a certain amount of experience, from a legal standpoint, an employer can't hire you into that requisition. So because you don't meet the minimum qualifications, that doesn't mean that they couldn't go back and write a different job description and post a different job description that's an entry-level job for which you would be qualified. So all that's to say, if you're a fourth year looking for your full-time career when you graduate, your very best opportunity is to fully engage with the UVA Career Services and attend every single opportunity you can to meet employers on campus, because they are there on grounds looking for entry-level roles for which in all likelihood you are already qualified, and it's your very best bet. And so because your degree is highly coveted in the workplace because you're at an incredible school and you're going to graduate with an incredible degree. But when you're out there next June looking for a job, and if you do have 0 years of experience and you don't qualify legally for something posted for 2 to 5 years of experience, recruiters, even if they think you look fantastic on paper, they're going to have to turn you down. So your best chance is applying to jobs that are open by employers who are taking the time to visit grounds this fall, who are looking to hire entry-level people who are just graduating from school next May.
And Crystal, thank you for mentioning that. And students, we did have a workshop on Monday about Handshake, but many of you already know about Handshake, but that's where you can see when employers are coming for different events. We have many career fair events coming together this fall. Also, jobs are being posted through Handshake, both jobs and internships. So we recommend, again, looking in Handshake for those events. And Heather, as you know, sends out a weekly bulletin, usually on Tuesday mornings, highlighting a lot of these events as well. And if you're part of a career community, you'll also get a bulletin about different events that go on within the career communities, like the business community or technology community as well. So definitely you can see all of those events that are in Handshake, and many of them are in there right now where you can register for them. Additional questions from students? Hillary and Crystal, sometimes I'll hear like with the elevator pitch, it's good to bring something that's unique about you, like that unique factor. Can you kind of speak to that?
Sure. Unique is always really hard, but I think it kind of circles back into like how you add value. So maybe like for me, it really can be anything. If you've worked on like a pretty unique project. It's just kind of like elaborating high level elaborating on like, what that project is. Maybe it was like an impactful project. Maybe something unique is that you've been involved in something that really isn't related to, like who you are, like what you do, if that makes sense. It's just kind of like if you're like an engineering major, but you want to talk about, your involvement in something else and kind of like, again, bridge how that would help you as like a professional. I think that would work as well. But in terms of being unique, for me, I don't think it's really about like being unique. I think it's being more genuine, honestly. And I found that when students just tell their story and actually tell their real story instead of trying to be competitive and be like this perfect student, that's kind of what is unique, because it's kind of like the same. We look at everything like pretty holistically. So when you're looking at a resume and looking at a story and, your students are being genuine with their story and everything like that. I'm kind of word vomiting a little bit. Those are typically the more unique students I see versus the students who, try to, look like this perfect, candidate on paper. Sometimes because everybody else is doing that, you blend in more than you stand out.
Now's your opportunity. Ask your questions.
Here's a question. So let's see. The hard question is what your weakness can tell. The hard question is what your weakness can you tell us anything about this question? Okay. So when if a student were to be asked about a weakness, sort of what's the best way to address that? Any sort of tips and takeaways for addressing that question?
Absolutely. I think my biggest piece of advice is everyone has a weakness. So if you go into an interview and say, I don't have a weakness, that is probably the biggest red flag as like an employer. So when you have like the weakness question, it's always about, owning that you have a weakness, but also saying, this is what I'm doing to, address that and making sure that, you're kind of showing that you're very good at self-reflecting, and two, you can, actually act to change, to kind of change that. So as an example, like one of my weaknesses, like I would say is like, I am so impatient and I like to get things done pretty quickly. Others don't work that way. So I've kind of said I'm impatient, but I've set deadlines for people so that I have an expectation and they have an expectation, and it allows everyone just to kind of work together a little bit better and cohesively.
And if someone asks you that question, please don't say that you're a perfectionist. That's sort of like, that's not really answering the question, because you're basically saying, I'm so perfect, that's my problem. And, we hear that a lot. And so it's sort of a cliche answer. So please don't say that one.
So I think this is a really good question too, based on that weakness question is, why do you actually ask that question? What's behind that?
Well, at CoStar, if we ask that question, because it's not really a standard question for us, but when hiring leaders would ask it, it's because we work in teams, and that's one of the aspects I think that is the best about CoStar, is that we do work in teams, but we're trying to get a sense of the team dynamic and understanding, what you consider to be a weakness of yours might help us in figuring out which team you might be better for us to place you for an internship or for a full-time job. If we have 50 different software engineering teams, we're trying to match up who might be the best fit with which hiring leader. Because as Hillary said, we're not expecting perfection, and we know everybody has weaknesses. So, I wouldn't want to put two impatient people on the same team with Hillary, for example. We already have the impatient one, so then, I would be going for other characteristics with other teammates, and then all together, hopefully, we're the most efficient that we can be.
If you had to name one characteristic that you look for in your new hires. What would it be?
So for me, what I look for is the hunger to learn, especially for internships in early careers. You want someone to be flexible and adaptable. And, I know those are two characteristics. So sorry, you're getting three. And just like wanting to learn. In my experience in recruiting and like career development, it's scary as a new hire in early careers to own up to your mistakes, to say that you've made a mistake or to say that you don't know how to do something. So for someone to be confident, to be able to ask questions and to be flexible to kind of change what they're doing because they made a mistake and kind of learning from it, that characteristic I think goes very far and will help you throughout your career.
Hillary and I did not rehearse our answers, and I actually was going to say intellectual curiosity. So I think it's very similar to, the hunger to learn. We're looking for people. I mean, in a company like CoStar, I mean, we are innovating and changing the way the entire real estate industry operates. So we're constantly pivoting and changing, and having that intellectual curiosity to figure out how to do things better and move and push the company forward is really like the common tenet that runs through our DNA.
So just because I happen to know this, for the students, are you all aware that CoStar is one of the largest drone management companies in the world? Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, we
I
do
think
own
that's
the
really
largest
cool.
privately owned fleet of drones in the world. And we use those drones to fly. We fly them on missions to take photography of all of the commercial and residential buildings in all of the United States. And we're moving across Europe now. We're already in Canada. So if you're going to be at Tech Night Takeover, come see us. We're going to have drones. We're working on getting permission to fly them in Scott Stadium. So I can't promise that we'll be flying them around, but we're hoping to get that permission before Tech Night Takeover.
Maybe in the
Peggy
parking
and
lot.
Francis, if you know who I can talk to, that would be great. And I'll talk to you offline about that. But I have a couple of calls out now, trying to figure out how we can fly the drones for Tech Night Takeover.
Just I mentioned that because that's a really cool thing about CoStar that is not an obvious thing that students would realize. That's why I said it.
Yeah, so we hire architectural photographers who have aviation licenses, or they get aviation licenses through us. So they're able to plan these drone missions and fly the drones around. And so if you haven't checked out any of the photography, it's really beautiful.
That is so cool. I'm sure students would love seeing that in the stadium. For sure. And Peggy, you can reach out to Peggy. She'll help make you some contacts for you. Any other questions? You can unmute or put in the chat. Well, Hillary and Crystal, thank you so much for being here. We're so grateful. Students know that we're so thrilled that you're here and could take advantage of this. If you have any questions or needed help in any way, our team is very happy to meet with you, and you can make appointments through Handshake. We're so much looking forward to seeing you on grounds. Hillary and Crystal and Peggy all mentioned about events, so please check those out in Handshake. We are having an open house on August 30th, starting at 11:30 to 1:30. Peggy's ordered some really cool water bottles, and we'll have food. It's a community builder and a way to welcome you all back as well. Please know that our team is here to meet with you either virtually or in person. And we are actually in the office embedded in Thornton Hall A wing, but we will also be happy to meet with you virtually as well. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for our wonderful employer partners, and happy Friday.
Come see us at
Thank you.
Come see us at
Thank
Tech
you.
Night